Hello and welcome to the Pots and Trowels podcast, the podcast that brings you everything you need to know about gardening. And my name's Martin Fish, and as usual I'm joined by Jill and Sean.
Hello there, hi. Well, look, I mean, I like that new tagline that we should just have that over everything.
Yes.
The podcast that brings you everything about gardening.
Covers everything.
It does, doesn't it? And this week, Martin's been to meet the Talking Heads podcast people, Saul and Lucy, and you've got that coming up very soon. Very excited to listen to that. And what else are we up to, Jill?
And then some jobs, things to do in the garden and things not to do in the garden at the moment, because the weather with us certainly has been very wet, so it's not ideal for all sorts of gardening. And then the perfect excuse to get you out of the Christmas washing up as well.
Well, thank you both for joining us for a chat today. Nice to see you both. Are you both keeping well?
Yeah, it's been okay.
Yes, thank
We're
you.
about to get a whole lot of rain.
Oh,
so
right.
we'll
Okay.
see.
No, not good, is it? It's been a lot of rain, hasn't it, this autumn, so winter. So I always ask people, and it's nice to have two guests for a change. I normally only have one guest. Always ask how you got into horticulture, because I know you've both been in horticulture for your working life. So Lucy, let's start with you. How did it all start for you?
Yeah, well, Martin, I think it's my parents who got me into horticulture because they are retired now, but they were smallholders on the Land Settlement Agency. So I was brought up on a small holding, and then they moved to Crockerford to carry on growing vegetables to the London markets, and I carried on helping them do that. And as a teenager, I thought I quite liked this, and I went to Writtle College to study horticulture, then Y College. And then I got a job in horticulture, not to do with small holdings at the end, because my parents had warned me off that, because there was not much profit in it by the time the supermarkets had come along. So then I worked at Wisley as an advisor for 6 years. And that's when I then got a little taste of writing for magazines, because I wrote for the Garden magazine every now and then. And then Amateur Gardening magazine, then editing Grow Your Own magazine, and now a merry mixture of gardening and writing.
Yeah, so a nice mixture there. And for those that don't know, you mentioned Land Settlement Association, or LSA. Because I don't know if they exist anymore, but am I right in thinking they started after, was it the First or Second World War?
They did start after the war, and it was, as you say, it was a cooperative of growers. So essentially the government were trying to encourage people who'd been put out of work through the war to feed the nation and get a cooperative growing, so they had more selling power rather than as an individual grower. And it was huge in its day. There were settlements all over the country, and Mum and Dad were part of one that was at Lawford in Essex, and they learnt a lot through that. It gave them a good foundation for becoming smallholders in their own right when they moved then to just outside Colchester with their own little 12-acre nursery. Yeah,
excellent. So like you say, it's in your blood since being young and continuing to do it now. That's great.
Yeah.
So what about you, Saul? How did it all begin for you? Because you are a plantsman through and through, aren't you?
Do you know, yes, I absolutely love my plants. I'm very lucky. I've always wanted to be outdoors most of my life, and being in Devon, which is where I'm from, we're blessed with beautiful outdoor spaces, whether it's the Dartmoor, the coast, woods and all sorts all around. And my grandparents are very keen gardeners, but they're also really keen to drag me along to National Trust properties or RHS Wisley or Kew whenever I was visiting them. And though I grumbled at first as a young boy, I slowly seeped into my bones these outside spaces, especially plants. Love trees. Absolutely, I think I soon realised trees were all different, and I got to know them a bit better. And then slowly, just plants seeped into my blood. Unfortunately, my school wasn't very proactive on fostering that. They wanted you to go off and do other things at university, so I did go off and do a bit of archaeology for a bit. So I was digging holes, but not for plants, more for bones and ceramics and things. But slowly decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to be a gardener, and got into the National Trust. I've worked National Trust, I've worked at Kew, worked for the RHS, and now I'm a private head gardener.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a fantastic career, and me and Lucy will always say we're so glad we've been doing it most of our lives because we absolutely love it.
I know. I mean, I agree. A lot of people, in fact, somebody only the other day said to me, "Are you retired?" I said, "No, I'm not retired." And they said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I told them, they said, "Well, it's as good as being retired, isn't it? It's not a proper job." And I thought, I took it, I didn't know whether that was a compliment or an insult, but I think a lot of what I do, and I'm sure it's exactly the same for you two, it doesn't feel like work because you enjoy doing it so much.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think that old phrase of, find a job that you love and then you never work another day in your life. Saul and I have definitely embraced that. And there's sometimes when, especially in the winter, actually, when the weather can be a little bit dank, but you get these lovely sunny days when it's crisp and sunny and there's the frost in the air and you're all alone in a garden working. And it's just heaven, Martin. You've got the sun on your back, you're all wrapped up. You're doing something really productive and creative, and it's just, goodness, it's just a lovely thing to tap into.
It's really expansive as well, gardening, so you can work in one area, you can do it in your personal time in another, you get to go all around the country. There's just so much to do that it does take a lifetime to actually indulge it. So, I can understand why someone said it's something to do in your retirement, but I think it's something to do all your life. We're always saying get into gardening whatever stage of life you're at because it is a fantastic hobby.
Exactly, yeah, I totally agree. So you both mentioned in your career paths the RHS, the Royal Horticultural Society. So Lucy, you were a garden advisor at Wisley. So just for those that don't know, what does that entail? Because the post is still existing, isn't it? They have lots of garden advisors. So what did you do day to day?
Yeah. Essentially, we were at the coalface when the RHS members asked us any gardening question, whether that be where they could buy plants or how to look after things or how to control problems in the garden or how to design the garden, what soil type they had, how to identify plants, all those sorts of questions. The advisory team under the guidance of Guy Barter, my boss at the time, we would answer those questions, whether they be over the phone or email or letters. And then more and more it became going to shows, or visitors would come to the RHS gardens and speak to us face to face. So it was a lovely foundation because I'd done my studies at college. So I'd learnt about the science of horticulture, and then I actually really got to tap into what gardeners wanted to know. And through being able to speak to the staff at Wisley and my gardening sort of knowledge and science knowledge, I was able to explain to them how to do something, but not just the how, but the why. Why are you doing this? And give them that knowledge so they could then go away and make their own judgments on what they were doing, which was great.
And it's a great learning curve, isn't it? Answering people's questions, because you've got to, you learn so much yourself in the process of that. So it's, you suddenly find you've discovered facts and information about things that you didn't know about. So that's great.
Yeah.
Saul, you worked for the RHS. I think that's when I probably first met you. In fact, I think I met you, Lucy, when you weren't Lucy Chamberlain those days. I remember before you had that name. But Saul, what was your job at the RHS?
Yeah, I'm trying to work out what it was even to this day. No, I used to work in the shows department as the show manager, firstly for Hampton Court Flower Show and then for Chelsea. So yeah, quite an interesting change from what I'd been doing before and what I'm doing now, as I'm still really a hands on the tools gardener. But it was a very interesting period of time in my life, learning about the sort of wider context of horticulture, because if there's something you learn at Hampton Court and Chelsea is how widespread gardening is in terms of nurseries, garden designers, all the sundries, all that kind of stuff, floral design. You just learn photography. You just learn about all this different stuff that I sort of never knew when I was stuck behind the walls of, say, the garden I worked down here in Cornwall. So, yeah, a fantastic job, but probably not one that I was going to be doing forever, because I am, as I've said, a hands on the tools kind of chap. Yeah. And
what I should mention, I mean, we're going to talk to you in a little while about, you've got a very successful podcast and you do broadcasting and involved with shows. So we're going to chat about that shortly. But whereabouts are you? Because you're not together. You're both in completely different parts of the country, aren't you?
Yeah, so I am in Essex, and where I am in this village, we are near rivers, and we actually have a very sandy soil. We have quite a dry climate. Essex is known for being a very, very dry county, And along with the sandy soil, it's almost the polar opposite of what Saul experiences.
Yeah, so I'm on the other side of the country in the southwest, down in Plymouth, in Devon. I live in the banana belt, as I call it, because we've hardly had a frost. Well, I'm still waiting on a frost to come. And clay, wet all the time, and very, very different. Which is great because we have two different gardening experiences.
Absolutely, yes. So you've not had a frost. Here we are. We're in December now, first week in December. What about you? What's the weather been like with you, Lucy? Have you had any frosts yet?
Yeah, well, last week we had a succession of frosts building up to a -3 one night. That was our coldest. This week is milder, so we're still in that kind of like wet, bit more what I call dank, a bit misty and a bit dank at the moment, gone back almost to autumnal conditions. But it's definitely being a slow entry into winter this year as opposed to last year, which was a rude, abrupt arrival of winter in Essex. And it's a nice season. It's more gradual, more more easy for gardeners to get their brains around, I think, as winter approaches. Yeah.
Good. So yes, so different parts of the country, different plants, and we're going to talk in a few minutes about your podcast. So we'll join you then.
I really like that idea of find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
That's so lovely, yeah.
I feel like I'm kind of there because I just love messing around with cameras and audio, microphones, equipment, all that sort of stuff. And gardening's a similar kind of thing. It's a hobby that you can potentially turn into a job, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And indeed, lots of people do that sort of after they've had a career doing all sorts, solicitors, banking, plumbers, you name it, teaching, and then they leave and go into horticulture. And I think it's true. You know, I've done it since I left school, but it did start for me as a hobby in my teens, and it still is a hobby, which sounds odd when you think I'm a professional gardener, but it's still my hobby, and I can play around and do different things. And it's a bit like you in the kitchen, isn't it, really? That's, it's part of your job, but
yeah, it is. Oh yeah, no, I do. But I'm into the gardening as well, through you really. But I just love that horticulture has got such a variety of jobs. You can say you're in horticulture, but you could be a greenkeeper, you could be a maintenance gardener, you could work for a big house, doing gardening.
Thing, yeah.
Just such a wide variety.
It's
and
really
I
broad,
love
isn't it?
that Saul is such a tree man, because you are a bit of a tree man as well, aren't
you?
I
love my trees, yeah. I do love trees. But there is so much you can do in horticulture, or even go into the science side of it if that's what you want to do. So you don't have to do the practical, you can do the science side. So it should be pushed more as a career, but sadly it's not. But I know there is work being done at the moment, I think, with government to try and get it on the curriculum more and to give the horticultural industry a real boost, which we need, get people into it.
Are there apprenticeships available for...
There are.
For the 16-year-olds to go into gardening?
Yes, I think these modern apprenticeships, because you can't leave school at 16 unless you go on to college or an apprenticeship. So yes, you can do it. So it's a good route in for people.
Yeah. We're in a kind of new phase of work, aren't we, where people can potentially do a week-long course and then find themselves as a professional X, Y or Z, be it, I don't know, builder, gardener. And now, okay, you can have your own opinion as to how valid that is, but the reality is you can go and do anything you want in some respects, as long as, I don't know, that's a good thing or not.
Maybe, it is. I mean, the thing about gardening, I think especially, is you never stop learning. Lots of trades, you can learn that trade and you get then experience in it, but the technical side. But I think because horticulture is so broad, you learn every day. And, when I'm doing things, I'm continually learning off my peers, something that I'd never heard of before. And that's, to me, what makes it so fascinating. And I know quite a few people that are sort of coming to retirement age and actually, for no reason other than just pure enjoyment, will take a horticultural qualification just to learn a bit more. They're not going to use it to work, but it just gives them that more information for their garden.
And you can specialise, as you say, in one type of plant. So you could do orchids to snowdrops to birch trees to, there's just endless possibilities, aren't there?
Yes.
On a slight side note, I 20 years ago qualified as a snowboard instructor with the idea that I was going to make that hobby my job, and I'm kind of glad I didn't, because partly it's seasonal. It's very seasonal work. You'd have to either travel a lot or do something different in the summer. But also I did some work in the area and then found myself just kind of teaching beginners and watching everybody else having fun further along on the slopes, and thought, okay, this doesn't feel like it's kind of what I want to be doing. But there's always going to be the fun days and the not fun days, even if your hobby is a hobby or a job. I mean, it's only a few years ago where Jill and I sat in a nice warm and watched Martin presenting in a pouring rain in our August bank holiday special.
Yeah, it was a wet one, wasn't it?
Yes. I am a bit of a fair weather gardener,
you
I must admit.
Yeah, you don't tend to garden in the winter, but that was summer. But you two were sitting in our summer house in there, perfectly dry and cosy, filming it from inside, and there's me outside in the pouring rain with rain dripping off my hat.
I think our followers appreciated your love.
I'll put a link in the show notes if anyone wants to see just how wet that was. But I think at one point you were wearing your son's army coat trying to keep dry.
Yeah.
Anyway, shall we go back and hear some more from the Talking Heads?
Yes, let's. Well, I'm back again now with Lucy and Saul, and one of the things that you do and you're known by lots of people for is your podcast. It's very successful, Talking Heads. And tell us about that, because, I mean, first of all, how does it get the name Talking Heads, and what made you decide to do it?
Well, I'll let Saul introduce it, because actually it was he was the one who studied the podcasting course, so you deserve to be the one who introduces it.
Yeah, well, me and Lucy, we first met at BBC Gardeners World Live when a fellow friend of all of us, Bob Sweet, put us together to run the advice desk there, which is their plant experts desk. It's expanded in a myriad of ways, but we won't go on about that too much. But me and Lucy were sitting there we'd done it for a few years, and we sort of thinking, we both do the radio, but how can we get our voices out regular about the profession of horticulture? A lot of podcasts very specific. There was one on house plants, there's one school gardening, there's a few out there, but nothing was really talking about professional horticulture. So I said to Lucy, why don't we do a podcast? There's a podcasting course coming up at my local FE college, and it was only 6 weeks, very basically just teaching you how to do all the bits and pieces. And they said, you've got to put together a sort of a theme and what you would do. And I thought, brilliant, I'll get Lucy involved. Let's talk about our lives in gardening, because we're both professional head gardeners, and we really like talking about that profession and gardening in general. So I think we put together about 4 episodes, which was sort of tentative. We had no idea this was going to go on for how long it has. And then COVID struck, and that was probably the touch paper, I think, for us, because we realised we didn't have much to do. Apart from talking about, we were still gardening, obviously, because that was one of the things you could still do, be outside and garden. And we started doing it 3 times a week, just talking to everyone about our gardening lives. And I think it really touched a lot of people who were obviously, caged up at home and didn't have time. And gardening became such a release for a lot of people that they started listening. And really, it went on from there. And that's about 4 years. We're almost into the 5th year of the podcast. 230 episodes, if you include all the bonus interviews. And it's a mad ride. We never thought we'd ever get this far. Someone contacted us the other day and said they've listened to about 6,000 minutes. Was it 6,000 minutes of us talking? Just crazy to think about.
That's a lot of words, isn't it? That is an awful lot of words. And you do it every week. So I know some podcasters do them in series, or seasons is the modern term, isn't it? Where they probably do a block of 10 and then have a break and do another block. But you just carry on regardless, whatever the weather, whatever time of the year.
Yeah, we do. I know it's nice. We get a lot of correspondence from our listeners. We've got a very loyal listenership, and you'll find that, Martin, now you've stepped into the world of gardening podcasts. You do get these wonderful people repeatedly coming back to you and saying how much they enjoy things, which is so pleasant, such a surprise, and just it does motivate you to keep going. And so, each week we sit down. Sometimes we plan the structure of a podcast. Sometimes we just press the record button and see what comes out. And every single time, I think Saul will hopefully agree that actually we find the process ourselves really enjoyable. It's so nice to be able to indulge our gardening passions with each other, because I've got relatives in my family who are gardeners, but if I try to speak to them for half an hour every week about all the ins and outs of it, I think they just glaze over. So it's lovely that I've found Saul to chat to, and he me. So and it's just a very enjoyable process for us, and I think that maybe hopefully comes across to the people that listen.
Yeah, well, I've listened to quite a few. I mean, that was a lot of it was research ready for doing our podcast. And yours is one that I can really enjoy listening to, because you both know what you're talking about. You're both very knowledgeable. They are interesting, which is good. And you are, of course, the name Talking Heads come from the fact that head gardeners. So you are head gardeners chatting. So tell us a little bit about the gardens that you look after. I mean, Saul, you're down in Devon, so it's going to be, I would think, subtropical in places, isn't it?
Yeah, well, really the garden I work at, which is a private garden called Stonelands, which is just on the outskirts of Dawlish in East Devon, is actually a very traditional, what I would call an English country garden. I know it's a very broad term that people use, but 16 acres, 3 acres of expansive lawns, herbaceous borders, vegetable garden, meadows, lots and lots of trees, so kind of a bit of everything. I've yet to inject my subtropical flair. That's really my home garden, as you'll know. But it's interesting, because I've always been someone who's garden outside. I know Lucy's the same, but she indulges a very unique passion, which she'll talk about in a minute. But I've tried to keep bits of my gardening life all separate, so that I can sort of skip from one to another. So I like to go home from an English country garden where I've been mowing for, say, 8 hours on the ride-on mower, having a good think about what I'm going to have for my tea, to actually go home and then see all my bananas and my gingers, colocasias. Have that sort of difference is quite important to take me from one garden to the other. I wouldn't want to be doing the same thing all the time. But I love my garden down in Devon. It's it's very cathartic, and working privately has been quite interesting for me. I've always worked in the public sphere. I quite like the privacy of being able to garden as and when. But I do miss the banter slightly from the public, but it's a bit different.
Yeah, and you can get your banter in other ways, can't you? So that's good. So what about you, Lucy? What about the garden you look after? Are you still there, or have things changed?
Yeah, no, you're right, Martin. Things have recently changed very well. I'm still sad about it, but there's the new doors are opening, so that's all good stuff. But I was head gardener at East Dunellan Hall, and that was an 85-acre estate. Again, sort of on the the estuaries of Essex, and on that lovely light sandy soil. And what drew me to it was it was very local, but also it had a walled kitchen garden. And being from a small holding background and then editing Grow Your Own, to me that's where I naturally fell. That's where I so enjoy growing my own food. And then this wonderful opportunity arose of East Dunellan Hall, literally a couple of miles from my house. And when I first started there, oh my goodness, just the concept of being able to look after not just the walled kitchen garden, but also things that I'd not cultivated before. So there was a moat, there were water gardens, there was wildflower meadows, woodlands, there was hot and cold herbaceous borders, all sorts of different areas on that large estate. And that's what I really thoroughly enjoyed. I was doing it for 9 years, and just being able to prune all the roses up against the walls. These were huge, big, mature plants that had been there for eons, and fig trees, and managing the herbaceous borders, the ebb and flow of borders, and also the wildflower meadow. I loved taking on that and just seeing how it can be changed in management, which really then has a massive knock-on effect on the flowering species that you have there. So enjoyed the whole thing, and it has made me a far better practical gardener through those 9 years of being there, and expanded my practical knowledge in that sense, because I've been able to apply my skills to all these wonderful ornamental plants. So that has been, I'm really thankful that I've had that time there. And now I'm looking at other gardens to work for them, and it means I can bring a lovely skill set along to then apply to those gardens. I've already been renovating roses and figs in the village area. I've been asked to renovate roses for people just down the road at Abberton, and so it's lovely to be able to apply that craft. And yeah, okay, there's smaller gardens. I think the days of looking after an 85-acre estate are probably behind me now. But yeah, it was a lovely time, and it's really given me a lot of skills.
Yeah, and I would think with your knowledge and experience, you'll be in great demand. You really will. You'll be fighting them off with a hoe, saying, I can't possibly fit you all in soon. So outside your head gardener work, you've briefly touched on radio. I know you've both done radio. Are you still doing a little bit, Lucy? Because I know we all know there's been a lot of changes in local radio over the last month or two. But you're still doing a little bit, I think, aren't you?
Yeah, I am on Sundays with Sadie 9. I'm on the BBC Essex Gardening Hour, so that's 10 to 11 every Sunday, and that's running right through the winter months, which is I was quite surprised at, but that's a lovely thing to do. So yeah, it's people phoning up or WhatsApping or sending emails, and it's just a Q&A session essentially. So back to my days of Wisley. Yeah, and it's thoroughly enjoyable. The accents of Essex are a wonderful thing to behold.
And what about you, Saul? Are you still doing any radio?
Well, Toby Buckland's still going, so I don't do it full time. I'm the substitute gardener, substitute teacher for when Toby goes on holiday, and he is still going, and the producer's still got me as a backup. So I'm just waiting for that call, and I'll be on that show again on a Sunday. But
we need to encourage Toby to take more holidays in that case.
Absolutely. Do you know, during COVID, he didn't take one holiday for 2.5 years. So it was a long time till I was on the programme again. But I'm sure he'll go off for Christmas. They generally call me in for Christmas and Chelsea. Those are the two that I can almost guarantee that Toby is not actually in Devon. So
right.
We'll see.
Okay, so you've told us a little bit about your garden, Saul. I know you like your subtropicals, your gingers and the bananas and all of that type of thing, because I've got you down for a few gingers in the spring. Lucy, what's your private garden like? Is it like a mini stately home garden?
Do you know, almost in a way, Martin, not on the grand scale at all. It's a smaller garden. It's about 200 by 40 foot. But what I have done, because of my time at Donnellan Hall and being inspired by it, I've essentially created like a miniature kitchen garden. It's 40 by 40 foot, and it's quite formal in its layout, and I cram all manner of crops in there. I love growing my own food, and now I can do so for my family as well as for the hall. And actually, where the Hall kitchen garden has stopped, my own garden has picked up that baton, and has allowed me to really indulge myself in growing food. But I've also got a lovely little wild area, which I might turn into a woodland garden at the bottom there. And we've got practical areas too for entertaining, and lots of nice herbaceous borders. So essentially I have created like a mini East Donnellan Hall in my own house. And I love it. It's, again, sandy soil. It's some of it's sun, some of it's shade. I am growing some exotics as well through the very generous donations of Mr. Walker and other local gardeners. So they excite me. I think exotics are a wonderful thing, and I can understand completely why people love growing them. So yeah, it's a melting pot of all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly going to have a go. Obviously we can't leave them out where I am over winter, but I shall put them in the greenhouse, tuck them up for the winter. So I'm relying on Saul, because Saul, you're also on the RHS Tender Ornamental Plant Committee, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, which is good, because you are the sort of subtropical man there, which is good. And Lucy, are you on any committees and other work besides things we've chatted about, or do you not have time? Because it sounds like you're very busy anyway.
I am busy, but Martin, you've done your research, because I've literally just signed myself up to be a member of the RHS Fruit, Veg and Herb Committee starting in January. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I went along to one of the meetings at Vincent Square and met the committee members there, and it was thoroughly enjoyable, lovely people, but also exciting, because I can see the role of the committees, and I really would love to contribute to that. So I'm very excited about it.
I think that's good. I mean, there's quite a few different committees, but they've got so much experience and wealth on them. You know, Saul and I are both on the Tender Ornamental Plant Committee. And I was looking at a photograph that we had taken recently at Wisley, and when I look at them, I think there's so much experience and knowledge with those people, really specialist knowledge. Welcome to the committee. And it's a lovely. If I weren't on the tender, that would be the one that I would be quite happy to join, because I love growing as well, and there's some lovely people on the Fruit and Veg Committee. So yes, welcome to the committee. Well, thank you. I'm glad that we've managed to catch up and have a chat. You'll be ready for your Christmas breaks now. So you put out your talking heads every week, so people can find that in their normal way. because we want them to
Yep.
listen to you. And they can follow you on social media. So how do they follow you on social media, Lucy?
Well, for me, I'm on Instagram, Martin, and I need to rebrand myself because at the moment I'm still at Head Gardener LC, so I need to change that to something else. But that's where I am at the moment.
And Saul, what about you? Are you on that Instagram thing?
I'm not on it. I know I'm not on Instagram, Martin. I'm still a bit old school. I'm with Twitter, or X as it's known now, at Gardening Saul. Though I'm not as active as I used to be. Maybe I should get a bit better at it, but it sort of drums you down a little. All social media drums you down, doesn't it? A little bit, I guess. Twitter especially.
Exactly. When I go in fits and starts, I'll be quite active and then I forget about it. So I need to go on a course or something to remind me how to do it.
Yeah.
Thanks for catching up. Take care, and I'll hopefully see you in the spring at one of the shows or something like that.
Oh, thanks for asking us, Martin. It's been a joy.
Thanks, Martin.
Those links are in our show notes if you want to go and see what Saul and Lucy are up to, and obviously if you want to go and listen to their podcast. It's a fantastic podcast, actually. They're
well
just
worth a listen.
just great, easy to kind of listen to, and information there and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and can I go on a podcasting course? I want to go on.
Yeah, well, I'd like to go on one as well. I'd like to go on a basic one, how to
Let's
switch
all
a
go
computer.
on. Yeah, we could all go on one.
I'm joking aside, because obviously the technical side I kind of know about, but what I am intrigued by is how you get to a wider audience. So I've heard reviews are good. Maybe we should have reviews.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to review us?
Yes.
That would be good.
Yeah,
There's
that'd
a
be
star
nice.
rating, 5-star
Please.
rating.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Don't put
we'd
words in
like to
people's
be.
mouths. Yes.
But also the one thing you mentioned it as you were talking to them, is that they just carry straight on through. There's not season 1, season 2, season 3, and it's something we kind of did a little bit with our YouTube videos, isn't it? We just said, actually, we're just going to keep making these. 'Cause no matter what season it is, there's stuff to do in the garden, isn't it?
Yeah.
I agree, yes. I think there's always something to do or talk about. Gardening can be enjoyed 12 months of the year. So
Yeah, and then there's house plants, greenhouse care.
yeah. Yes. Yeah.
What not to do on your lawn in the winter is all
Exactly.
those kind of
We
things.
can always find something to talk at. As you know, Ken, Saul and Lucy, that's why they're at over 200 now. They've just carried on weekly right the way through. And between them, they've got a vast amount of knowledge. I mean, as you know, Saul loves his ornamentals and his tender plants and his exotics. Lucy's very general, but she's also very good on the fruit and veg side and written a few books on that subject as well.
Didn't we see, we were in New Zealand visiting our daughter and the family, and we went into a bookshop and saw her book.
We did.
on sale
That's
in New
right.
Zealand, which
yes,
was great.
Which I
It was
did tell her
fabulous.
about when I saw her. Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, she's an international author.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I've got a few things to do in the garden. Not a lot. I mean, it's a bit wet and soggy
it's
out
so
there.
wet. Are
Don't
you
know-
wet in Nottinghamshire, Sean? We are in
Yeah, it's just
Lincolnshire.
damp. I mean, we had a power cut a couple of days ago. The power was off from 1 o'clock till nearly 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, right.
So what do you do when there's no power at 1 o'clock and you're supposed to be working but you can't? Well, I went in the garden and started raking leaves up off the lawn, which was great until I found some of where the dog had been. But let's not go into it.
Don't dwell on that.
But I got some large, piles of leaves, which would be great for compost heap. But then I looked back at the lawn, and it looked like I hadn't even started.
Yeah.
There were just so many leaves still there.
Yeah.
We have a largish silver birch in the garden, and it does give us quite a lot of leaves. I mean, that's a good thing, I suppose. Though, it's good to have a tree.
It's very good to have a tree. Lots of benefits there, environmental and wildlife and health. In fact, next week, I'm going to actually talk to a tree nursery. I'm going to collect a couple of trees that are going to go in the garden. So hopefully he'll tell us more about that as well. But they are great to have in the garden.
But it is
trees.
better to keep on top of the leaves on the lawn. You can leave them on the border because then they'll just rot down. But the leaves on the lawn are better sort of swept away, aren't they?
And despite the wet and windy weather, I thought this year some trees have hung on to the leaves longer than normal. I mean, here we are now, almost the middle of December. And if I look out the window, we've got a big Bramley apple tree and there are still some leaves hanging on at the top. And I keep raking them. We've had bucketfuls and bucketfuls, all go in the compost heap, all great to make compost. But I think that would be one of my jobs, is have that final clear up of leaves, because there's very often at this time of the year corners where you've got wet, soggy leaves on pathways. Get rid of them, don't throw them away. Either put them on a border, put them in the compost heap and let them all rot down for compost.
So then the
next
ones
year.
on the border in the spring, you just sort of tickle those into
Yeah.
the soil a bit.
By then, hopefully hopefully they will have had all winter. They will have, the worms will have pulled them down,
Yeah.
which is great because that helps to improve your soil structure. Just tickle them into the surface. They almost are self-mulching in a way. So that's something you can be doing.
Slight technical question about silver birch, because that's the tree we have in the garden. Are there male and female ones, or are they all the same? No,
I think it's male and female on the same tree with birch.
The reason I ask is we get lots and lots of these interesting seed pods at a certain time of the year, which just get everywhere. And I just wondered if everybody got those, or if it was
on your
just
birch tree.
Well, we assume that's where they come from. Yeah, that's the assumption we've made.
I mean, normally the catkins.
They're tiny little things. They're not catkins. They're kind of like tiny little. Yeah, it's almost like you can sweep them up, and you've got piles and piles of them.
I'm not sure they're off your birch. I mean, with birch you get the
somebody else's.
catkins, and you get the pollen.
Coming from somebody else's garden.
They are. You get the pollen in the spring because clouds of pollen off them. But you've got male and female on the same catkin. So the seeds will be those catkins and very, very fine seed. So there's obviously something else nearby you need to get some and let me have a look.
Intriguing. We've always assumed they're off the silver birch, so yeah, I'll collect some next time it happens, and we'll investigate.
Okay.
But they're everywhere. They're in the washing. They're in, what are these things? Anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Proper gardening digression.
Exactly. No, I mean, and the other thing that I'm going to be thinking about, because Christmas is now only just over a week away, and
that's wishful thinking, isn't it?
Wishful. No, not at all. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you're a Christmas Grinch.
I'm not. I love the food at Christmas and veg, because we grow quite a bit of veg, so I want to start thinking about what to get out of the veg garden, because you don't have to get it on Christmas Eve. Things like your winter cabbages, your kales, your Brussels sprouts, your parsnips, your leeks. You can dig them or lift them out of your garden or your allotment if you grow them several days ahead, trim them, put them in somewhere cold or a fridge, or I just put them in our old cold shed outside, and they'll keep fresh for days and days and days.
Yeah, and then you can prep them all ahead, can't you, as well?
Yeah.
I made our root veg bake at the weekend, which we mentioned on last week's podcast. So that's in the freezer, ready to go. Bit of cauliflower cheese, that's done as well. So yeah, I'll be wanting some leeks and some cabbage as well. And parsnips.
Yeah, I shall be out there with my trug, don't you worry. Yes, if ever the rain stops, I will be. And the other thing I'm going to do, and I know you've touched on it before, Sean, is the lawn. If it is a bit wet and soggy, try to keep off it. I mean, we've had unbelievable rain. There's quite a lot of local flooding around as the fields are absolutely saturated in Lincolnshire, and I think we've officially had the wettest November on record. So it only takes a light shower to top the water levels up, but there's a pathway to our greenhouse that is getting a little bit trodden. So I am going to get the fork out and just do some spiking, push the tines in about 3 or 4 inches, and give it a bit of a wiggle, and that will just help that surface drainage and get some much needed air down to the roots. So there are bits you can still be doing even when it's wet and miserable and cloudy, although at the moment we've got a dry spell for a few days, so fingers crossed it stays that way.
And if you've got a greenhouse, then it's the perfect place to suddenly, when it's washing up time on Christmas Day, you can suddenly say, do you know, I need to just go and check the thermometer in the greenhouse, or just put that bit of fleece on. I think it's getting a bit frosty.
Yes.
So yeah, it's worth having a greenhouse just for that.
Well, you've got to look after your tender plants in there. So yes.
Jill, perhaps you should be getting that in first and leaving Martin to do the washing up, because it sounds like, I think that would be better.
He's always the first.
By the sounds of it, our next video is going to be in the greenhouse just because of the weather, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we've got, yes, absolutely. I want to do a bit of seed sowing, early seed sowing. I'm going to have a go at growing some large onions. I haven't grown them for years, and I'm going to have a go. And traditionally, lots of the growers would sow them on Boxing Day. So I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to sow them, certainly between Christmas and New Year. I'll be sowing my onion seed, and hopefully by August time we'll have some whoppers.
But might be a stupid question, but presumably you need a bit of space to grow those, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to grow hundreds. I'm just going to put a row in the garden, so there'll only probably be a 10 or a dozen. I'm not trying for any world records. They're lovely. The big onions tend to be quite mild in flavour and sweeter. And Robinsons, who I've got some seed from, we've chatted to them on the YouTube before, and we'll get them on the podcast at one of the shows. They are famous for their onions, so I'm just going to grow a few, and if I can get them a little bit bigger than normal, They will be wonderful.
And then we'll be cooking up some onion rings.
Oh, yes.
Huge ones.
Yes.
You'd be able to wear them as like a halo on your head, wouldn't
Onion
you?
soup, Lincolnshire onion soup.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, if you've got a question for us, well, for Martin, as we've said before, do send us an email, info@potsandtrowels.com, or just leave a comment on this video. And do review the podcast if you have the chance to do that. That really helps us reach a few more people. And obviously share it to your friends and press whatever like buttons or whatever is in front of you. Not the dislike button, ideally, but you know.
Yes, and we'll answer them on, because we're next with you on Christmas Eve, or that's the next podcast. So yeah, let's do a Christmas Eve special. Answer some questions. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Fantastic. Right, well, we'll see you next time.
See you then.
Bye.
Watch the videos on YouTube or Facebook, follow us on Instagram, Twitter or X, and subscribe to the podcast and never miss a thing. For more information, go to potsandtrowels.com.